Okay. Okay. You should be able to hear me now. It's because when it died yesterday, I changed what mic to use and then I forgot to change it back. Okay, good. Welcome, welcome. Thank you for being here, Tarot Gothis and New Beginnings and Judy and anybody else that is here. Thank you so much. Hi, Mai. Thank you for being here. Now that you can hear me, at least we caught it early. Because sometimes I'll be going on a ramble and don't know that nobody can hear me. And then I have to go back over my ramble again. So at least I didn't get started. So it's good. So this is our Saturday live where we talk about hip hop specifically. So think about what questions you might have around hip hop, what you might like to look at. And I am going to um, ramble a little bit on our number from last week, and then we will get down to business. Okay, good. Good. I'm glad everybody can hear me. Uh, it's always got to be something. So at least if it's this at the very beginning, we'll be good. Yeah. Oh, really? That's amazing. See? You have to get in the right vibrational mode and then those healings and blessings are able to come in. That's wonderful. So last week our special wheel gave us the number 512. So the vibrations we were supposed to be looking at were around 512, and those add up to 8. And so, really thinking about um, where have we seen like dualism, and this is not necessarily dualism in the way we're used to seeing it, because that would be 11. This too is really about the shifting of dualism into something new. So it's like dualism shifting to new. But then we also have this shifting is really happening is this change in perspective. Oh, I'm sorry I missed it. That's so exciting. I didn't even know you had gone live. Sorry I missed it. If you have your replays up, I'll go back and watch. That's very exciting. Hey Noah, thanks for being here. It's good to see you. So we have this dualism that's shifting into something new, and we have this change in perspective. And so we're just talking about right now, for anybody that's coming in, where our random number wheel chose this number for us last week. And I'm just going through it until we are in a good place to start talking hip hop. So I think this is actually pretty fitting, where we have seen some of this like split, this dualism split, and it trying to shift into something new, um, but really into like this change in perspective. And that's really helping for this bigger change to happen. And remembering that that change is neutral. So it could be anything. It could be any kind of change. It could be change that is seen as positive or as negative. It really just is based on your perspective. And all of that comes together into this 8, which is those repeating cycles. So we'll come back to this, but this is the number that came up for us last week. And so we'll come back to this and we'll get another number. All right. Anybody have anything that they particularly want to talk about? Any numbers or vibrations in hip hop? Anything that you were seeing in hip hop that you want to discuss this week? I'm doing much better at not like planning everything out. So I don't have anything planned, but I always have some things to talk about in my back pocket. So if there isn't anything, that's fine too. Any words, any happenings that you want to talk about? Thank you all for being here. You want to talk about Cardi B? What do you want to talk about Cardi B specifically? Because she actually has some interesting things happening in the vibration right now. We could talk about her name. We could talk about like her dropping her album this week. Maybe that's what we'll talk about. That her dropping her album this week and immediately going platinum. Um, yeah, uh, she knew what she was doing. Like she has a good team behind her. Uh, so actually, how she did that is she dropped her album, but on her album she already had um songs that had already reached platinum level. So she had Up already on there. I think she had WAP on there on this album too. But because she had released them as singles, they weren't tied to an album. So she was able to have all of these new songs and then have these ones that had been out and already reached like a certain level on the same album. And so then the album immediately went platinum. And this is really like when we start talking about this shift that is happening in hip hop, we have to think about what are the parts that we're releasing and letting go, and especially right now in this 9 energy we have part. So this shift is made up of a release or letting go, an ending, but it's also made up of shifting energy into something new. So putting the energy into a new space. It's okay. Thank you, New Beginnings, for bringing that up. But it's okay. They can we could have a little bit of discussion in the chat, but being able to contribute to the discussion, I think, would help us all. Okay, so back to this. So this shift is happening with a release or an ending, and then putting the energy into new places. And so what Cardi B did as part of this energy is one, ended the way of doing things. So ended what new meant. So ended defining like how an album was defined. Because if Kendrick Lamar had put Not Like Us onto GNX, the same thing would have happened. Because Not Like Us had was just a single release. Or if he had put really any of those songs, if he had put Euphoria, 616 in LA, Meet the Grams, if he had put any of those onto the GNX album, that album gets credit for all those numbers that those singles had already made. That those numbers that had already been out there and that had already happened. And that's what Cardi did here, is she ended the way that album was defined. So she put those singles that had come out and were already doing numbers onto the album, and the album then now got credit for it. So ended what album meant, like how that was defined. And then put all the energy into the new songs as well. So it's this double whammy, and this is what we're seeing in the shift as well. It's okay, Noah. You and Mai had your conversation, and that's fine. And then we'll just shift over here. We're talking about shifts. So here we go with this shift. Yeah, but it looked crazy and it felt crazy, but it actually was very much in line with the vibration of this month and of this year. So because we're in a year of 9, 9 is all about ending and shifting. And I've been saying, probably to you all and to everybody, that this 9 energy of this year feels more like a shift than it feels like an ending. And so it's not like a harsh ending where we've had at times where it's a hard ending. We're really shifting and transitioning, which is very different. Very different. You're right, New Beginnings. That it's whoever she has behind her is basically putting this together. But it is one of these places where we're seeing an attempt to try and do something different, to shift that energy into a different place and to do this in a different way. So we saw it with all of like the social media artists, especially the TikTok artists, where it seemingly came out of nowhere, but really all they were doing was finding a new way to capture their audience, to get a hold of their audience, and to build up those numbers. So it is very much in this vein of shifting, because this 9 energy is shifting. But what comes right after this is the 1. So it's shifting into the 1 of new energy. And 2026 is a 1 energy, because 2026 is a 10 that goes to 1. And we've seen a lot of these endings and shifting into a new way of doing things in a lot of different ways. Some that we perceive as good and some that we perceive as bad. Yeah. Yes. Yes. You're right. Like this shifting is happening, and it's happening in so many different places and in so many different ways that it's been a whole nother level. You're right, Noah, where it's been completely different. And I think that's why also, not just in the hip hop space, But in all these spaces, we're very much, it's almost like um, we're tripping and falling into something new because it's moving so quickly. And it's moving so quickly this month in particular because we're in a 9 year and also in a 9 vibration for the month. So it's a double whammy. It's a double whammy of 9. So hopefully that answers your question. Is there anything else around Cardi B you guys would like to talk about? I haven't gotten through her whole album yet, but what I've listened to, I'm liking it. It's it's an interesting vibration for me. So when I listen to music myself alone, um, it's fun for me to be able to dissect the different vibrations that I'm seeing and feeling from the person and from like the beat and then the words themselves. Um, but when I am actually watching other people, this is why I like reactors so much. Because when I'm watching other people react to the music, um, it's fun to be able to see how that music is impacting them. Thank you, New Beginnings. Well, and what's interesting too, now that I think about it, we could stay on this topic a little bit longer, is that like last week on that first 999 portal, we had a big, huge release of energy, and we had um, some very big events that were seen as negative, and then some very big events that were seen as positive, and it was at these two extremes. And this word shift, and we've looked at this before, but this word shift actually adds up to 62, which is also an 8. And we've been seeing this kind of play out all over the place. And we saw more of it this week. Now, I don't know if you remember, but when we first started talking about September, we talked about how it's actually an 18 that's going to the 9 vibration. And so it's this 8 energy, it's this return of energy that is feeding the 9. So I'm not surprised that we keep seeing and feeling this 8, especially because we're feeling this shift energy. But it's a combination of this 9 energy that's coming from a return of energy and this 2. And a lot of times this 2 is coming from that 11, where there's just something happening where the lines are being drawn. And there's like two sides to everything. And it's figuring out how to be able to reconcile those sides and not get rid of one or the other, but actually take the pros and cons from both and put them together. And I think that's also what is coming from what Cardi B did. Because she took some of the things, or her team took some of the things that were really good about having a new album and like that whole process of being able to promote the album and bring it out. So, like the promotion piece. So they took all of those, and I don't know if you saw, she had all kinds of these videos of her like out selling the CDs. Like, you know, I say we, but it's really any of those of us that are old enough to remember. I won't say how old that is. About like she brought back promoting it herself, being the face of her album, and like selling the actual CDs, which is how a new artist would start getting their name out there. So pulling from some of these pieces that worked well and that were good and leaving the parts that weren't. And same thing with this new part. You can hear in her songs where she has kept a lot of the things that made her who she is. And then has left any of the parts that weren't necessarily working for her or that she's grown out of. Because it's been quite a while since we had a Cardi B album. So she has definitely grown and matured. It has been quite a while. And so this new also is about the growing and the changing. And that's something that's happening in hip hop overall. So we've talked about before how we have this triangle of identity, and how the first part of this is your youth. So from the time you're born until about 27, you're in this youth phase, and it's when you're building up your identity. You're figuring out who you are. This is where you're like testing grounds. So anybody that is around the ages, and I think this is some of the things of why we always see like the older generation clashing with the newer generation in every aspect of life. And we see like parents with children, and we've all been through that. But it's because once a youth gets close to this transition place. So this is a place of transition. So from about like 25 is when your brain fully solidifies, until about 30, when 30 is when you're considered a spiritual adult. So in the spiritual vibrational world, you're not really considered matured or an adult until you're 30. But this is a big transition point. And you're like testing all of these things to figure out your identity. You're building up an identity here in youth. And then once you do that, once you get through this transition point, now you're moving into this place of power. But when you're in power, the way that we build up power is we have these tests. We have these tests of our identity, where now your identity is being tested, and you're having to really go through it. Something that's interesting is that the word power, we'll come back to that. But the word power, it resonates at a vibration of 77. And you've heard me say it before, where 7 really is this combination of action and flow. So it's taking perfect action in perfect vibrational flow. And this is creating like this momentum of one really good action right after another really good action. Yeah, it turns, once you have it written all out, it does look like a 3D rectangle. So you're taking action and flow, but also 77 is the numerical vibration of the word wound. So a lot of times when we're in this power square, I came back here and I was like, oh my gosh, am I teaching geometry again? I'm not. I promise you I'm not. I'm not going to give you any kind of equations to remember. I promise. But So when we're in this power space, it is also where our identity is tested, and it's usually through the wound. So it's the wounds that are being tested. And this, so for hip hop, this point, transition point, would have been 2000. And right now, hip hop is here at like 52, and it just came through this space that's 50 to 51, that this is the biggest time when your wounds are exposed. But they're exposed for healing. So, like, if you scrape your knee and you have a wound, the first thing you have to do is clear it off. You have to wipe off the mask. You have to get rid of that stuff. And these wounds would have started to be exposed probably around 2018. I know that's before, because this is 23. 2023 is when hip hop turned 50. But going into this, it would have been probably right around 2018, like right before that pandemic, that these wounds would have started to be exposed. And so we're in a place, hip hop is in a place where it's preparing for this next transition. Because its next transition is, oh my gosh, I need another color. I know I always say that. Is right here when it turns 54 in 2027. So, all of that to say that if we go back and we look at what was happening like from 2000, and this is interesting to think about because this would have been like 2000 to 2009 here, and then this is like 2009 to 2018. The identity of hip hop was definitely being tested on what is hip hop, who is hip hop, what does it actually mean, and we go through this as individuals as well. You see all kinds of shapes everywhere. Yeah. Well, and that's actually very telling because the vibrations, a lot of the time, they're woven together. And so they can come through to us in a number of different ways where we can see them as actual numbers. We actually interact with more vibrations as words. So that's why certain lyrics in the song will hit you very hard. And then they can also come through as shapes, where you can see shapes in your dreams and stuff like that. So those are actually vibrations also, and we could talk about them and break them down because they have meaning also. Especially, but just like with numbers, if you're seeing the like repeated shapes, you need to, just like with the numbers, make sure that you're documenting what is it that you were thinking about, what were you seeing, what were you doing that may have come up for you as a message. And that's how we can begin to break it down. Because now I at times will see a shape, but it also has the numbers with it as well. It's all vibration and it's all a message. And while I was saying that, going off on little shapes tangent there. You were watching me? Yeah, though that makes sense. So you were getting a deeper message from what I was saying. You might need to go back and figure out what exactly I was saying. While I was thinking about this, I do believe that Kendrick Lamar was so Kendrick Lamar, I do believe, was around age 28 in this transition. So in this first transition of 25 to 30, when he did Mr. Morale, because that's this transition point is really where you're testing the structures and the stability of your identity. And you're doing that because you're in preparation for being able to go through all of this power square to really understand what your identity is and have your identity be tested. This transition that's coming up here at 54 really is about the healing of wounds, because the next square I don't know very many people that like math at all. And I tend to blame the way that we were taught. And I say we because it was me also, because I actually didn't like math even though I was really good at it, but I kept being told I was doing it wrong even though I'd get the right answer. So I think we all have different reasons for not liking math, but it all boils down to how we're taught it. And in all honesty, I do think it's part of, I don't know, you can call it a conspiracy theory, a bigger plan, or whatever. But for us to not be connected with math means that we're not connected with the numbers that are actually purer vibration than our words. And if we're farther away from pure vibration, we're farther away from the vibration of God. So I think it is a way to get us separated from that, because then we're outside of our power. Another tangent. I have those often, but usually that's when the best stuff comes out. And have some random tangent. Um, okay, okay, Noah. So if you started listening to Kendrick Lamar at Mr. Morale, that I believe he was about 28. And so he would have been in this phase of transition where he was really having to, and you hear it all throughout that album of him battling with what are these identity or character flaws, and how is it making him either stronger or weaker, and how to reconcile with that, because that's really what this transition point is. So you could and Noah, you are right at this place also. Like, we did your numbers yesterday, and you have so many powerful numbers that you're at this transition point right now also. So you could go back into Mr. Morale and be able to really take a lot from hearing how Kendrick is battling with this back and forth of character and identity, and figuring out, like, not just who you are, but what do you stand for, and who do you want to be. Because then in this power square, now that's being tested, and it's through that testing that then that gets stronger. You test the foundation first at this transition point, and then you build it up stronger. And all of that is to be able to get to this other transition point where we have the healing of wounds. So now anybody that has, like, really dealt with their wounds, and these aren't just the wounds that have been inflicted on you, and most all of these are like the spiritual, emotional, mental wounds that we're having to deal with, but they also can be physical, and they also can be like societal, like the societal wounds outside of us. But anybody that has worked on these wounds ahead of time is going to have an easier transition. Same with this transition here. Anybody that has built up a strong identity, a strong sense of self in this youth phase is going to have an easier time going through this transition. It doesn't mean that it's easy, but it's easier. It probably just doesn't last as long. And that's what hip hop is preparing to do now. So this power square is testing the identity and asking hip hop to really examine its wounds. What are the wounds that it has been carrying? And what are the wounds that it has inflicted? And this really comes from Chiron in our astrological charts. So if you want to look in your own birth chart, the wound is expressed by Chiron, your Chiron placement. And Chiron can either be direct or it could be retrograde. And like right now, we're in retrograde season where we have all these planets that are retrograding. So, and Chiron is one of them. So any child that's born right now would have Chiron in retrograde. And hip hop has Chiron in retrograde, which means that these wounds and the way these wounds are expressed are more internal. So for hip hop, we see these wounds being expressed internally, but also inflicted internally. Exactly. Where hip hop has always been very good at expressing and being really raw and authentic. But now it is time, because also on that, this reminds me that even on that Kendrick Lamar CD of Mr. Morale and the Big Steppers, he has the very last song, I believe, is Mirror. That's what you're doing when you're facing your wounds. You're looking in the mirror, you're seeing what are these wounds. And if you think about 2018, what are the wounds of hip hop that started to be expressed, so started to be seen, and then were very much on full display? So when you're in this time of like 50 to 51, and this goes for us individuals also, this is when you're most like, this is when all of your skeletons are shown. Everything is laid bare. And hip hop had a lot. Hip hop had a lot from 2003 until just earlier this year. Like all of these crazy cases and just like crazy obscene things that have been happening. But we have also seen that hip hop is healing these wounds. But one of the ways that it's healing these wounds, which I think is so interesting to watch, is that it's actually individuals that have already gone through this space. So it's all of the older artists that have already gone through this examination of the wound that are now producing music that's helping to heal the exposed wounds of hip hop. What do you think? Am I talking crazy? But being laid bare for the wounds is also very expressive for hip hop. It's going to be because it's happening internally. So it's like within hip hop, wounds are being inflicted. Whereas like there's other things like the United States has its Chiron facing outward, so it's direct. So most of the wounds it inflicts is outside on other countries, and with like people outside or defined as outside. That's why a lot is defined as external, and then a wound is inflicted. So from 2009, of like the biggest exposure of the wound would have been from 2018. So like right before the pandemic. Hi, Justin. Thanks for being here. So it would have been 2018 when a lot of the wounds were exposed for hip hop. So basically from here, let's go down here. So from 1973, when hip hop was born, until 2000, this would have been the youth phase of hip hop. This is when identity was being established and built. This is also when we probably would have seen a lot more. I don't know how to say this because it's gonna sound weird, but it's like a broader definition of hip hop, but also a more narrow one. So kind of like there were multiple definitions of what hip hop was. And multiple people were like defining what hip hop was. I'm glad you're here. Thank you for being here. So we're talking about this journey of hip hop, but also how it applies to us. Because we're coming up to a transition point for hip hop. So from 1973 to 2000 is when the identity was being built. But then it would have been right here from what, like 1995 until like 2003. This was the first shift. This would have been the first shift, the first transition for hip hop. And this would have been where really it was like a battle between structures. So you spent all this time trying to define what hip hop was and what it stood for. And then you got to this transition point, and it was like these two, and it could be more, but the best way to describe it is with two different ways of being in hip hop and trying to reconcile that. How do these fit together, and do they fit together? I think that's some interesting timing, because also that would have been when there would have been huge events within hip hop that would have begun to start testing the identity. So just thinking about like the battles between West and East, and the death or the murders of Tupac and Biggie would have been in this space. So there would have been a lot of really big events that made you question, like, is this hip hop? Because then that transitioned hip hop into this next phase, which was the power phase. So from 2000, and hip hop's in this power phase right now. From 2000 until 2027, it'll be in this phase of power, which is it's testing and like fortifying. It's like making it stronger. So it's testing the identity to build strength. So like for strength. And we're right now in this second shift space, because this would be from 2018 is probably when we would have started seeing some of this, into probably until probably about 2029 is when we have these major events that are leading the transition and trying to get hip hop to transition in. But this transition, where this one up here, this first one was really about who hip hop was, like who is hip hop, how is hip hop defined, what is the structure and stability of hip hop. It's stabilizing what hip hop is so that it can grow. Because right after this is where there was huge growth in hip hop. So when it found its stable points, then it exploded and got really big. But this shift that we're going through now is really about healing wounds. So then as those wounds are healed, we go into this third phase. So starting in 2027, I'm not sure when it ends. We go into power, or no, we go into wisdom. So our wisdom comes from our experiences and being able to step into a role of teacher and mentor from our experiences. So being able to teach others about what we've learned from our own experiences. So by going through and really having this identity be tested and healing up these wounds, now hip hop can step into a place where it's seen as a source of wisdom. And so this is actually the full expression of identity. This is when you actually see who somebody really is. And this happens when you are at age 54 is when this starts happening. So when you get to that age where you don't really care. Some of us get there sooner than others of we don't really care what other people say. We are who we are. Or like the saying of you can't teach old dogs new tricks. This is kind of where it comes from. This is the same vibration. Because at this point, your identity is supposed to be strong enough where you're able to have a full expression of that identity and be starting to pass on the wisdom. You're contributing your vibration even more to the world through your wisdom. Okay, I've been rambling a lot. So what questions do you have? What comments do you have? What else can we add to this? Do we need to shift to something else? Let me know. What do you think? And I do think looking at some of the music that are in these spaces that could represent these would be interesting. Okay. Thank you. Well, and I think it's really important. Like, we're kind of lucky that we are younger than hip hop, even if it's barely for some of us. We are younger than hip hop, so we can actually use hip hop as this example. So, as we are feeling this shift and transition of hip hop moving into this wisdom space, we can use it to help prepare ourselves. And I think that's really what Kendrick Lamar has done for a lot of people, is that his music has come from such a, like, you know, high vibration, that he's giving examples to the youth on how to be able to build their identity and stand for who they are and what they stand for, to be able to go in through this transition, but also showing what truly healing wounds is for this power group, and beginning to understand that from your wounds, power can come from those. And I'm sure that way past 2027, we'll be coming back to some of Kendrick's songs and seeing how there are messages and bits of information that we need to step fully into wisdom as well. I think it's beautiful. Exactly. Yes. Yes. So, yeah, he's one of the examples I use, cuz Malice is 52. So, Malice is right here. So, he is definitely one that has is now showing hip hop how to be able to heal from the wounds. But it's interesting because if we look back at a lot of the artists, because Malice also left hip hop and left being part of the Clips right around this transition point. So as he's transitioning and questioning his identity, who he is and what he represents, that was really right around this point for him in his life. And then being able to go through and reconcile with that and build up and get to a place where he is very powerful in his identity, where he could come back, and not just come back, but actually be an example of what wisdom looks like. Like, you can be yourself, you can be your raw, crazy human self, because we all are, and still project wisdom and still have a lot to contribute to the world. Yes, I agree, New Beginnings. Yes. There's several that have made this shift through their wounds, their own personal wounds, that have now allowed them to be examples. But now hip hop as a whole has to go through it. And that's what some of the growing pains that everybody is feeling in all generations as hip hop is going through this transition. It's probably similar, like if we go back into the records, um, and not just for the music, but if we also listen to the interviews and what people were talking about in this 1995 to 2003, there probably was a lot of talk about transition and what was And this would have been, at that time, it would have been a lot of people that were Gen X. So they would have been talking about what was fair and what wasn't fair, and establishing a balance, and justice, a lot of justice talk. Hip hop is part of Generation X, and Generation X has Pluto in Libra. So that's where this is coming from. And Libra is about justice. So it would be interesting to see the parallels between what was being talked about at this first transition versus the one we're going through right now. And I do agree that we have lots of examples. We just have to look for them, of artists that have already gone through, because we already have seen too. Like, I'm thinking about it, like even some of the artists where you're kind of like, huh, what are you doing? Um, like, I'm thinking about like Ice Cube. He went through this whole time. So this power is when he was like going back and forth about, am I a rapper? Am I an actor? Am I a father, or am I a gangster? Like, what this back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, and all around. Um, but it's interesting that now is when he's choosing to step back into hip hop and into the rap game. He never really left, but now he's stepping back. It's like a combo identity where he's both. So I think that's really interesting. Good. I'm glad you're loving this. And hopefully this can be helpful for us. Um cuz this is what we're going to have to go through also. So I know for myself, I'm inching up on that Chiron return on the big 5-0. Um, so I'm trying to work really hard on my wounds right now, of like understanding what my wounds are, but also what wounds have I inflicted. And those are even the harder ones to look at. Of what are the wounds that I have given others, especially those closest to me. And I think that is like part of that reckoning for hip hop, is being able to look at the younger generations and say, you know what, it's really scary that it doesn't feel like there's anybody that can pick up this torch and keep it going. But what of those wounds have we inflicted? Because it seems like hip hop's always trying to, or not even trying, it has to defend itself all the time. But we have to look at the wounds that have been inflicted also. Yeah, exactly. Exactly, new beginnings. It is. It is. Well, and like we talked about last week, where um, Kendrick is getting those messages that are straight from God and putting them out there. Um, and now that it's allowing them to hop on. So what happens when you clear your wounds? It's like cleaning out your ears, and you're able to hear the vibrations better. You're able to actually type, like tap into those vibrations so that you can be in that vibrational flow. So, and you don't even have to heal all your wounds, because we know some of these people have not healed their wounds, and I don't know if it's possible for any of us to heal all our wounds in one lifetime. But you don't even have to heal very many, because like if one person heals the wound of, like, it's not really part of my identity, um to like drink or to smoke. or to use a certain word, like that's wounding, then it changes what they do. So again, like thinking about Malice, where he went through this whole testing of his identity and came through and said, "Yeah, I can still be here with my brother and I could still be part of the cliffs, but I choose not to use certain language. I choose not to um you know express certain things that are happening that I'm not doing anymore." And it's that authenticity that makes that vibration so much stronger. I really think that's why Malice is resonating with so many people. Yes, yes, new beginnings. You're really supposed to be trying to heal as many of these wounds as possible. And remembering that the way that it's set up, so we'll draw our weird person again, because that's the best I could do. But remembering as each individual, we are on both horizontal and vertical time. So horizontal time goes this way. Oh man, I didn't mean to cut its head off. Um, I don't want it like that. So we have horizontal time. There we go. Where this is like our past, and then this is our future. Hey, I can do numbers well. Sometimes I can't do words well, and I certainly can't draw well. But, we're going to just keep it moving. So, horizontal time is connecting the past and the future through us as an individual. And this does go all the way past us. So, these are like next generations. And it does go all the way behind when before we even existed, where it's our like our ancestors. So this time, um it's because you just keep wanting to see the rectangles, and I'm going to give you some more, Judy. So through us, time is connecting all throughout time, like with no end. It goes to the beginning of time and to the end of time through each one of us as individuals. But we also are part of vertical time. Here's another rectangle for you. See, told you there'd be more. Where these are, this is like our shadow, or I don't like to call, I like it, I don't, it's like, I don't like using high and low because people have negative connotations with that. And that's not necessarily what it is. Even with like less and more. So I'm not sure what word to use. It's more like foundational. So this is where you have your foundational vibrations. And then this is where you have like your highest self. It's your highest form. And again, I don't like that word highest. So if you have these foundational vibrations here, then these are like your expansive vibrations. And so we're moving across time this way. from our past into our future. But then we're also moving up and down because this is like your level of vibration or like the amount of vibration. So no spot on here is better than another. But your most healed self tends to be up here. And what makes it so confusing is because both of these ends have like the least amount of vibration. So that's also what's making it difficult. I told you we're going to get some more rectangles, more and more. And again, just like with horizontal time, vertical time, this extends all the way up into like what we would consider like heaven. It also extends up into space if you'd rather. And then this extends down all the way down into the earth. Because that's also part of our foundational base vibrations. Okay, so I had to draw all these rectangles and be able to say that when you heal a wound, so if this person has a wound here and they heal it up, that wound is not just healed for you, it's healed for 7 generations into the future. So you're healing that wound not just for yourself, not for just for your kids, but into the future for kids that wouldn't even know you, for generations that wouldn't even know you. And this is what hip hop is doing right now. That if hip hop can heal any of its wounds, regardless of how big or how small or how many, any of those are going to be healed for generations to come. But also, when you heal your wound, you heal 7 generations back. So that means by hip hop healing any of these wounds, it's healing the wounds of like the disco era. It could heal the wounds of the blues era. It's healing the wounds behind it as well. And this is the same for us. So when we heal, we're healing for 7 generations in front of us. We're really paving a way for generations to come to not have to go through the healing. But we also were healing behind us. So this means also that if our children heal any wounds that we have been unable to heal or unable to heal fully, them healing it is also healing us. Yes. Yes, Judy. Yes. Yes. And so it's important that hip hop has these wound healings within what it's expressing. In the music for sure, but in also how it's operating. And because that Chiron is retrograde, so it's how it's treating itself. Because I don't know if we can, but and it's not like that friendly, because battle rap is always going to be there. That's part of who hip hop is. That's part of its identity. a big part. So that's always going to be there. But it's the responses after that show you how big the wound is and what wounds are not healed. And by healing those wounds, now it can make sure that the next generations are not having to heal those wounds. And hip hop has the opportunity to not just heal these wounds for other artists that are coming up in the genre after, but for because we all are fans, that the fans of hip hop, those that are taking in the music and are connected to hip hop in that way, are also healed. That comes back to like what we talked about last week, where those music, those lyrics that are hitting your in the soul can be extremely healing. So that's how hip hop can be healing generations. What do we think? This is a lot. I thought we were just going to talk about Cardi B. Look at where we went. Yeah, I love it too. I didn't think it is really important for us to be able to use this information and be able to witness it and document it as it's happening for hip hop, because it is historic and needs to be documented, but also being able to use it for ourselves, because it's not just hip hop that is meant to be healing. We have so many things that are testing all of us in this world right now. I can't help but think it is the poking of these wounds for as many of us as possible so that it encourages us to heal the wounds. Because the whole earth, we've seen all kinds of crazy earthquakes and volcanic eruptions, and that is the earth healing. That is the earth raising its vibrations to a new level. And we need to raise it with, we need to raise our own as well. Yeah. Always. Always. Exactly. Exactly. It's a lot of testing going on, but again, what we saw was that when you're in that power square or at any of those transition points, that's what you're supposed to be going through to really build up your identity. It's meant to build up your power. So when it's time for you to send your wisdom out to the world, that you're powerful enough to do that. That's very important. And there must be some really amazing wisdom set to come out. Like, I think about when there was a time, I don't know, the only time I could really think about is maybe like right before that civil rights era, and like during the time of like maybe the Harlem Renaissance, when there was a lot of just wisdom pouring out of spaces where people didn't expect it to. But that's what's happening in hip hop. Hip hop is preparing to just send so much wisdom out to the world, but it has to be healed first. Woo wee! That was a lot, but a good lot. Good per usual. So I'm going to go back, whoa, through all of our stuff to our number. So after all that, we are reminded that the number we were supposed to be looking for and the themes we were supposed to be looking for this week are 512. Thank you. Thank you very much. I really appreciate that. So I know we've seen these themes big time. I just saw your message, Judy. Yes, yeah, we all have those certain albums that yeah, that just do it for you. Probably, it probably is an '80s baby thing. But I think every generation has their artists or their sets of artists that really represent them. And but we need to make sure as an older generation, not an elder generation. We're not claiming that. But as the older generation, that we are making sure that the healing that we're doing and what we're sending out is helping the younger generation to be able to get through those struggles. And I think that is what the older generation in hip hop is doing, or at least trying to do. Oh my gosh, a big, huge storm just came in. This happened yesterday, too. Like, we went so deep, and then all of a sudden there was, like, all kinds of rain. Oh, man. All right, we're going to get through this and then go make sure everything is okay. So, last week, 512 was the number that we were given from our random wheel. And it really was focusing in on the shifting, the returning of energy, but most of all, it was focused on change. A lot of change. And remembering that change is not just in one direction, because it is a neutral vibration. It could go in any direction. And I think we've seen that. I think we've seen that this week. Oh yeah. You guys are funny. Yes. Oh, I know. I know. So are we ready for our wheel to get a number for this week? I more just want to keep doing these numbers so that we can start being aware. Like I'm really excited that you came and you said, "Oh, I'm aware that I started seeing these shapes, or that these shapes were like trying to tell me something." And then we saw more shapes. But that's really that intuition. It's really the opening up of being able to tap into those vibrations. Oh, you hear the rain? Okay. We love that. I'm just worried about losing electricity. I don't want to like leave without a proper goodbye, like I did yesterday. But that was an easier fix than no electricity. All right, let me get to. Let me see if I could get to our wheel. We'll roll our wheel for this week. All right, here we go. Spin that wheel. Can you hear it when it's spinning? I always wonder that because I can't hear it. 437. Okay. 437. Now I gotta get back to my board. All right. So this week we will be looking for 437, which goes to 14 and then goes to 5. So more change. Oh, great. Oh, you can't hear it either? Okay. I always wondered. Because it's supposed to make like a spinning wheel sound. But I never know. So more change. Alright. That's probably expected because we're still in September. But this change is going to come from. So this is change. These are the themes that we want to look for, though, because this change is coming from this 14, where 14 is a mix of energies. And these energies can be extremes. Oh, I started with the wheel a while ago, but really all it is to I'm just want to randomly pick a number for us to just watch for these vibrations so we could get used to it. Because we need to start being able to pay attention to the vibrations more. Because by paying attention to those vibrations more, we'll be able to get more of the messages that we need to move along our paths. So we're looking to see, do we see these numbers this week? So this week, do we see 437? Do we see 14? Do we see 5? And like intentionally see it and recognize it, but also it's any of the themes that come from these vibrations. So we're still looking for change, but this change is a little bit different, and that it's a change because there's a mixing of energies or a mixing of extremes. Now the mixing does not mean in this case, because 2 would be if there's a combination of extremes that create something new. A mixing of energies is really a lot of times it's energies that they don't hate each other, but they also don't like each other. It's kind of like mixing like oil and vinegar. You can mix it so you could have salad dressing, but they don't want to stay together. They keep separating out. So it's looking at what is this mixing that needs to occur or that is occurring to bring change. And where that mixing is coming from is first from taking action, but this is action in flow. So it's not forcing the action, but it's taking action in a vibrational flow that makes sense, that matches. And by taking this action in this way, we're able to see growth happening. And then through this growth, foundations are tested and built, but also stability. And we see that we have this 4 here twice. So what we would expect to see is a lot around what is stable and what is not. What is stable? What is not stable? Figuring out that stability because of the changes that need to happen. And what this is feeling like is a lot of these conversations around, because I've seen them on several channels and several people talking about it, but it feels like it's getting bigger, is this discussion of like artists, human artists, and AI artists. You don't have to like each other. You can hate each other, but there's some kind of mix there of like, what is that mix? What is that mix where the art form can stay pure? The artists are able to still operate out of their talent, but the technology is able to become a tool that helps enhance that talent, not take away from it. So that's what we'll be looking for this week. So document any of those themes that you're seeing, anything that's happening there. And I may be back tomorrow because tomorrow is when we have another new moon in Virgo and we need to write our intentions. If I'm not back tomorrow, then I will definitely put out a post or a video to remind everybody to write their intentions. Okay, I think that's all I have. That rain made me want to take a nap. Well, and talking so long. So I am going to go and have a rest. Hopefully, all of you have a wonderful rest of your day and evening and weekend. And I'll see you again soon. Thank you so much for being here. Please make sure to hit the like button on your way out. And remember that you can always post your comments with any additional questions, anything that you would like to add, or any topics that you'd like to talk about on another Saturday. Thank you so much. Have a good one. Bye.